Welcome to the Federalist Radio Hour. I am Emily Jashinsky, Culture Editor here at the Federalist. As always, you can email the show at radio@thefederalist.com. Today, our guest is Dean Cain. He's not in Washington, D.C. like me. He's out in sunny California. Dean is the star of the new movie on Obamagate. It's actually called Obamagate, the movie. Dean, thanks so much for joining us.
I'm happy to be here, Emily. Thank you very much. And it is sunny and beautiful in Malibu today. I just want you to know that.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. It's not so bad on the East Coast in the fall, but in a couple months, I'll be more jealous even.
I actually love the fall on the East Coast. It's my favorite time of year.
Yeah, and this is election season. It's kind of stressful everywhere, coast to coast. And the new movie is set to come out soon. At the last I checked, which was just a few minutes ago, the film is at 83.5% of its fundraising goal. What does that mean in terms of the creative process? So are you guys in rehearsals? Are you filming? What's the situation right now?
Oh, we have rehearsed it and shot it. So
Okay.
What it means in terms of finishing the film is there's so much work that has to happen in post-production. There's so much that has to happen in editing, music, putting everything together. It takes money, and they outlaid a lot of money at the beginning to do a lot of things. But 83% of the fundraising is good for the producers, of which I am not one. So I don't worry about that as much. But we've shot it. We've done a lot of work on it, and it was a lot of work. A normal script for a film is about 110 pages long, and it's got description and things and action and all that stuff. This thing was 56 pages long with like zero description and zero action, just dialogue. So it's a lot of words, but the words that these two were texting to each other, interspersed with the tweets and some of the, I guess it's mostly tweets that Comey and Brennan and folks would send out. It presents a pretty interesting narrative. And these are all their own words. So we didn't make anything up. There's nothing fictionalized. This is their words, and their own words are pretty damning.
Right, and some background on the film is that it is, as Dean mentioned, it's just verbatim theater, reading off what we know from released government documents of the text messages between Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, and this is as they pertain to Obamagate. And this is a familiar role for you because you also joined with Christy Swanson, who stars in this movie as well, to play Strzok and Page in Lovebirds, which was a theater production that is also available on YouTube. How is Obamagate going to compare aesthetically to what you guys did in Lovebirds? Because that was very much just the two of you reading texts on the stage. Now, is that similar to what you guys have done with this film?
Not at all. Not even close. So we would go out on stage and just read the text back and forth, and it was funny and it was interesting, but we wouldn't see the stage until like the day before we did it. Mm-hmm. So we didn't really know what we were getting into, and the filming is just one camera or two cameras set up and shooting the whole space. Now, it plays like a play, much more like a play. And even though we're in a small areas, it plays like a play because we're acting out the words that they're saying to each other. It almost like it's a dialogue, and that changes it a lot. And it doesn't feel as, it's much snappier because it's like dialogue. It'll look like a whole different ball of wax than FBI Lovebirds, but it certainly has the same damning effect when their own words are put out in play, and people can hear what they were actually saying about the president-elect when he was candidate Trump, and of course after he was president. It is shocking. And if you think that there's no bias whatsoever in what Peter Strzok and those guys did, he may say it didn't color anything, but he also said he didn't have an affair. So there you go.
That's fantastic. See, one of my questions that I wanted to ask is what you learned about, first of all, what is it like playing Peter Strzok? If you could talk about some of the creative decisions maybe that you make as you're getting into that role. And also, what have you learned about the man through embodying him now twice in productions?
Actually, 3 times now.
Oh, 3 times?
3 times. We did a small version.
Lucky you.
Yes, lucky me. Listen, I think Peter Strzok honestly believes he's a patriot, honestly believes he was doing what was in the country's best interest, the Constitution be damned. I think that those guys and that whole cabal really got to a place where they felt entitled to handle the reins of government, regardless of what people, who the people elected. I honestly think Peter Strzok still thinks he didn't do anything wrong. He thinks that the things he said, I mean, I don't know that he even said that having an affair was wrong. He only said he was upset about the way it hurt his family, the things that I've read. It hurt his family during his testimony, blah, blah, blah. He's like, it really bothers me the way that, I hurt my family this, and I, that'll always bother me, kind of a thing. And it's like, well, okay, how about trying to take down a duly elected president? How about those things? And there's some funny moments, really funny moments, where it's, he wrote things like, just got back from a Southern Virginia Walmart. I could smell the Trump support. And then getting grilled on Congress, by Congress about it, and him just trying to run around in circles, playing word games, which is what he does. He's very careful with his words, and everything is, real careful. But like when they went to go interview Michael Flynn, he was very careful with his words, but he was trying to entrap the man. He was trying to get him to lie. It's in his own notes. And that's not how you run a government. That's trying to unseat a duly elected government, and it's awful.
So as an actor, how do you play this man who believes truly that he's a patriot, but is simultaneously, mocking the quote smell of Trump supporters in a Walmart? How do you come to a role like that?
Well, anybody who says those things, any villain you play, always believes they're doing the right thing. You have to believe you're doing the right thing, and the haters be damned, if you will, because he truly believed he was doing the right thing. I think they were worried about President Clinton coming in if she were to get elected, if they were to be, if they had been investigating her too tough. They were afraid because she can be rough, apparently. And so they were afraid of that. They weren't afraid of Trump because he was brand new to politics. He didn't have, so you're in Washington, D.C. You know what it's like in D.C. Tucker Carlson says it all the time. All you have to do is hang around and you're going to get promoted to a job. You hang around long enough, you're going to end up being somebody. And that's what happens to a lot of these folks. And then their career, they're entrenched. That's what they want. They're like, it's my time. I earned this. You didn't earn anything. You're an unelected bureaucrat who is, trying to overthrow an election. So these guys get really comfortable in what they're doing. And I believe he thought he was doing the right thing, even though on a micro level, maybe his vision was like this. When you step outside and look at it, you're like, what are you thinking, man? And it hurts the reputation of the FBI, unfortunately. Not the rank and file everyday FBI guys, but that leadership on down. It's the same thing that happened with a lot of our military. A lot of people just become politicians in those jobs, and they don't.
And that's why entrenched really is the best word. It's sort of what happens by osmosis after you stay around here for too long. Did you look into, how much time did you spend looking into Strzok's background, preparing for these roles? Like, I mean, even going, before he worked at the FBI, just trying to figure out what kind of person he is and what his motivations might be.
I watched his testimonies. I didn't go back and research Peter Strzok, the individual, all the way through. I watched a lot of things he did, a lot of things he wrote, a lot of things he said. And through that, I gleaned where I wanted to go with it. Christy talked to some people who knew Lisa Page and this, and they said one thing. What was the word? And she said it 3 times. Oh gosh. If I could just, it starts with an A, but it's all about being high on themselves. What is the word she said?
Like arrogant, or
maybe that was it. Maybe it was arrogant, and that's just it. Thank you. I couldn't find it. Where did it go? I think she literally said arrogant, and they have contempt for those below them, which is pretty much everybody else in America. And they say it. He literally says that about people and voters in the United States, how they're effing stupid. That's a quote. I didn't make it up.
You have to appreciate the honesty to some extent, but I think it does speak to this deep arrogance that even you can even say that aloud, let alone think it.
No doubt about it. And look, you can say, well, I mean, so many politicians are caught saying that, people are just stupid, blah, 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 blah. And that'll, are we stupid as a group? No. But can we get led down a wrong path? Yes, people can. So people can follow that sort of big, which I think the Democrats are doing, that's what they're banking on right now. They're banking on that. And they're getting the word out to a lot of people who are making a lot of noise. But anytime I get into a conversation with anybody about some of these things in politics and policies, it seems to swing in a different direction because they can't really back up their policies or politics.
What did you think it was between Strzok and Page? Why do you think they ended up both entangled personally and then sending these messages to one another? One of the things that's been so strange for me to think about is these are FBI agents and they're sending these candid, incriminating text messages, putting this stuff in writing. How did both of them end up being really dumb enough to do it? Is it arrogance again? And if so, is that what brought them together?
Yes, I think yes, and yes. I think there was that the idea that it was on their work phone. They thought because they thought Clinton was going to be elected, and they figured that doesn't go anywhere. That it's a nice little insight into what sort of happens in government, how things get swept under the table like that, which would really appall the regular folks out there. And they were so sure that she was going to be elected. They thought that was the safest place to do it. They could hide the things. I mean, there's a moment where he actually talks about, my wife has my phone. She thinks we're having an affair. I told her, no way. No, you're just having a bad day. She knows I sent you flowers. That's her calling on the other line from my phone. You hear this stuff and you're like, whoa, okay. At the same time, you see him talking about how they're the only ones that can save America and what they can do. And I think that arrogance, their co-arrogance, like a codependent relationship, the co-arrogant relationship, drew them together. They really felt that they were just above it all and doing, work for America. And I really think they thought that. And at the same time, of course, having an affair, because you know how exciting it gets when you're trying a nonviolent coup.
Yeah. What? Yeah, exactly. It brings people together. These nonviolent coups, they really do unify. Such a beautiful relationship. Yeah. Well, so is that what it was? I mean, because I actually wonder, and maybe you have better insight into this, like the extent of their relationship. Was it sexual? Were they basically dating on the side, or was it just kind of a sexual thing?
Well, I think that it's that sort of situation where you're at work more than you're at home, and it's your work wife or your work husband in that sense. But they would travel and do things and go places, and he was in room, what is it, 1402 or something like that, and he had remnants of Qdoba chips and salsa and was having her come down. There's things that they would talk about not on the phone, like great story for you, not for here, kind of thing. There's stuff like that. There's little innuendos here and there. They don't actually talk about, the specifics of their affair, but they do say, at one point in time, he does say, hey, my wife's calling from my phone and she thinks we're having an affair. I told her, no way, we're just great friends who happen to sleep together all the time and intellectually have sex too. So
that's just like, these are FBI agents. I still can't wrap my head around the fact that these FBI agents were doing this.
He was considered the #1 counterintelligence agent in the world. And it gets to a place where you feel like you're untouchable.
Right.
I'm untouchable. I'm too good. I'm entrenched in this position. I'm too good at it. I'm being covered by my boss, whether it's Comey or McCabe or whoever it might be. And so let's go. We can rock and roll and do this. We're all on the same team. And no, you're not. And you got caught. But they still wiped so much of it clean. I mean, then you look at the Mueller report, the Mueller phones, the Mueller team, their phones, 25 or 27 of them wiped. Oh, just by accident? I mean, because this stuff is damning, because it gives real insight into what they're thinking. And the question is, does it bleed over into what they're doing? There's been no official finding that it has. I find it hard to believe.
It's interesting that this project and FBI Lovebirds and others, it's verbatim theater, basically, where you're reading exactly what they said. And what's so interesting about that to me is you have things, and we can talk about the Comey rule on Showtime that just recently was released, but it's not even like you're putting forth a conservative version of what Obamagate was. It's actually like, it's actually just this is actually just what happened. You don't even have to spin it or wrap it in a conservative narrative. The balance in this case is literally just the words that came out of their mouths.
And that's the most damning part of it, because the Comey rule or whatever that, $80 million thing where they're, having everything, it's all told. I mean, Comey was giving interviews talking about how wonderful it was and blah, blah. I think you're going to get one specific narrative. I got a funny feeling. And it's all James Comey's narrative. And that's what it's going to be. It's going to paint him out to be a Boy Scout, which is why we dressed James Comey in a Boy Scout uniform in Obamagate. Right. And he's going to come out like a Boy Scout, and he's really careful with his words. But what he was doing was bad. It was nefarious, and he wasn't saving the Republic. He wasn't you know, some of his tweets and things are so funny that they come through in the play Obamagate, the movie, that I had trouble not laughing every time they were on stage, performed on stage. I would just try to look down and do my work, but it's just so funny, time, geological time gives such perspective, stuff like that. I mean, like, what? So many questions, so many answers. I mean, they're just so funny to me. And I know they're not going to be in that self-righteous piece of propaganda called the Comey rule, whatever it is. Is that what it's called? The Comey?
Yeah, I think it's the Comey rule. Yeah.
Comey rule. Woo. But again, I think he thought he was doing the right thing. I really think he thought he was doing the right thing. Again, unelected bureaucrats doing things to harm elected officials.
I think this is something Hollywood misses time and again, and you're certainly more familiar with this than I am, but they take interesting characters like James Comey, somebody who, if you're reading his tweets, I mean, they're hilarious. And for a balanced perspective and a more insightful perspective on Comey is going to be infinitely more interesting than a partisan version of Comey. And I just wonder why, Showtime isn't making Obamagate the movie, because the narrative is so compelling. You would think that Hollywood would be kind of clamoring to tell this story and to tell it in all of its interesting detail, and yet they're more interested in doing whatever the Comey rule is, which is this sort of like partisan, uninteresting,
propaganda,
one-sided story. Yeah, it is. It's propaganda. They actually came out and said that this movie was intended to influence the election.
And it's pure propaganda. That's amazing. Well, look, Hollywood used to make those kinds of movies where they thought it was interesting, All the President's Men, stuff like that.
Yep.
Now it's the opposite. Now you couldn't make those because that's subversive. It's terrible. You got to make something that toes this line, and that line is the Democratic line, 100%. Mm-hmm. And listen, I live in Hollywood. I look at friends of mine, people I know, who write the most hateful, ridiculous, bigoted things on Twitter and places that I'm just shocked. And they throw around words like fascist and racist and xenophobe without care. And those words cease to mean anything. Those are awful words. And that somehow has become the norm, and it's okay. And it's sort of the same thing in the way they're making movies now. You're gonna put the establishment. That's what you're doing. You're protecting the establishment. So now Hollywood, which was always that bastion of the left, which seemed like liberty, for freedom and information, they're the ones who are wiping their phones. They're the ones who are, shilling for Comey and things like that, which is you're shilling for the establishment. And when you're in DC and you become establishment, you're entrenched like that. It's ugly business. It's the same reason Joe Biden's been in, office for 47 years. And you look at the way his family has enriched itself, especially Hunter. That's disgusting. John Kerry's kids, Nancy Pelosi's kids, because they're all around I say Hollywood, might as well be, but it's Washington.
Yeah. Right. And there's entrenchment in Hollywood too, right? And that's why people are terrified of going against like the party line. And it's funny, you said like Hollywood and the Democratic Party, the political establishment, are kind of interchangeable now. And there's a lot of money that flows in both directions, but there is entrenchment in Hollywood, right? In the sense that people are really scared to do something that might offend a studio or studio head, because they lose jobs and they lose opportunities when that happens.
Absolutely true. But I do believe that success, like tremendous success, can overcome that. I mean, if someone went out and made a conservative film or a film that was just buck the Hollywood, system, if you will, and just got this huge audience and huge amount of money, because money is power here. Right. If you have money, you can make product. Right. And the problem is studios, there's 12 people who make the decisions on what the studios are doing, and Netflix and things and so on and so forth. That's it. And when Michelle Obama and Barack Obama and Susan Rice sit on the board of Netflix, that's something. That's the former administration on the board of directors for because they're trying to, control the narrative. And they're right now, I think there's people fighting against it, but right now they have the overwhelming control. But I just don't think that will last. I just think people are too smart, and they want to see both sides of an issue. I hope and pray.
Yeah, I think they do. I mean, like Dave Chappelle can do what Dave Chappelle wants to do, and there's going to be an audience for it because it's Dave freaking Chappelle. Yeah, exactly. He's got FU money,
and he offends both sides.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, and that's how it's supposed to be.
Exactly. And it's not anymore. If you look at SNL, I don't know if you watched SNL, the premiere, it was,
want to, but I can't. Because it
they
only takes one side.
Yes, exactly. And there's so much comedy to be mined and poking fun at the Dems, and any honest liberal should be able to admit that. I mean, because political parties are inherently corrupt. I mean, they're both corrupt. And so if you're a comedian or an artist, you should sort of like relish that opportunity.
I mean, come on. Nobody played Jerry Nadler waddling away from the microphone where he might have made a mess in his pants. Nobody did that? Come on. Right. Oh my gosh. That's like, what? That would be everywhere back in the old days. Mm-hmm. Johnny Carson would have been like, strange walk there. You know, something you notice it. There'd be things that were talked about, but it's just like swept under the rug. You know, people wishing the president, you know, ill health when he's ill with the coronavirus. Oh, you deserve that, blah, 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 blah. I mean, openly saying that. This stuff's incredible to me. Mm-hmm. It's incredible to me.
Right.
You think after the Nick Sandman thing, you know, there's this more punchable face. It's always the violence thing too. That's the thing, is like, there's so much violence in the name of politics. Political violence is insane. It's wrong on every level. I don't have to agree with somebody politically, but I'm not going to get violent over their thought process. But people have wished harm on me tremendously for having my political beliefs or stating my political beliefs. And I find that insane. Plus, I'm not afraid to duke it out. So don't come at me with that baloney, because it ain't gonna end well.
Well, and so you've been kind of an out conservative in Hollywood for a while, right? Like it's no secret anymore that you're openly conservative. How has that process? I'm sure this is a question that you get constantly, but what has that process been like for you in terms of, like, I imagine you had friends in the industry that didn't know what your political beliefs were before, or maybe this was before things got so crazy that they didn't care. But now, what's the contrast?
Well, here's the thing for me. Like, I live in California. I grew up in Malibu, California. My parents were best friends with the Penn family, Sean Penn, Chris Penn, you know, and so I grew up with these guys. Sean Penn and I could not be more diametrically opposed politically. Do I dislike Sean? No, not at all. I don't like some of his political choices, and I would tell him that. And we can talk about it because we're like family. We've known each other that long and been through deaths of family members and things, and just awful stuff. But we don't agree politically, and I really don't agree with him politically at all. But my beliefs haven't changed since I was in. I mean, the morals and the standards which I try to follow and believe in haven't changed since I was a kid. I've gotten much more interested in politics, but I've always had the same beliefs. I believe in equality of opportunity, but not equality of outcome. I don't believe everybody should get a participation trophy. I don't believe all those, things like that. So hard work begets victory and begets, you reward hard work, you reward merit. And we're not doing that anymore. But that's something that has become, for some reason, a conservative belief. And it's not. It's not a conservative belief. It's what everybody wants. We have the ability in the United States to rise from nothing to gain everything, regardless of your sexual persuasion, your sex, your religion, your skin color, none of those things. That's why everybody wants to come here. You have more opportunity here than anywhere else. But, socially, I'm very liberal. So, when people start talking about, that's why I always want to talk policy. They're like, you're such a conservative, because I'll wear a cross. Okay. And I've been to where, so I believe in God. Okay. That's a feeling, am I going to Bible thump you? No. But I grew up in Malibu, for the love of God. It's just really interesting to me. So people generally in Hollywood, they consider me a conservative, and they're like, okay, he's a conservative. He's Mr. Conservative, this, that, or whatever. If they want to discuss any politics or policy, I'm wide open to it. Love to. When it comes to like getting jobs and things, Hollywood is a place where they, how do you say F you in Hollywood? Trust me.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's a place that's very backstabby. It's very, everyone is screwing everybody over, and it's not, and there are some people, like Dwayne Johnson is in a position, because he's the highest earning star out there, to do anything he wants. He can make any picture he wants. He can get it done, and that'll happen. There's certain people who can do that. I'm certainly not one of those people. Now, my career, I was a father, for the last 20 years, I've been raising my son. So I have put that first, and there's a lot of restrictions I put on what I would do as far as films and stuff. But does it affect what I get now or the opportunities I get? Probably. Nobody's going to say that to my face, or very few would. I would respect them if they did. I would also call them bigots, but because that is bigoted behavior. I would, in a second, hire people with whom I disagreed politically if they were going to be good for my film. I wouldn't even think twice about it, but I don't think that's the norm in Hollywood. And I was going to say, pendulum's going to swing back.
Okay, so let's talk about that. That's interesting. Why do you think that? Because it does seem as though artists are starting to catch on to the notion that what the left wants to do actually would crush art, because it involves squelching absolutely, like, you have to squash any whisper of dissent from the full progressive agenda. It's nothing, and it basically renders art, especially good art, impossible. So have you noticed, is that why you're optimistic, that people are kind of finally recognizing what that concept and that level of political correctness will do to the industry?
I'm optimistic just because I'm an eternal optimist. I can't put too much sway into everybody sort of figuring it out. I've had it figured out in my head for a long time. And I would, at the same time, I would protect someone else's right to make a film that I found abhorrent. Right. It's their business to do that. And that's their free speech right and their ability to go ahead. And I wouldn't judge them for it. I'd be like, "Oof, I don't agree with that."
What about like Cuties, like Netflix, the Netflix version of Cuties? Did you think that was sort of beyond the pale, or that was something that was within, the right of artists to put on a platform?
Without having seen it, I would say that it's within the right of the artist to put it on a platform. Mm-hmm. It was made in France, and I understand the concept behind it, which sounds very, I'm a sworn police officer, so I actually work on a Crimes Against Children Foundation. We work on internet crimes against children. So this sort of stuff just feeds into everything we have to fight against. And it's horrible. And there are really some sick individuals out there. And, even the laws that are being passed here in California, a 24-year-old can have sex with a 14-year-old, and it's not a problem. I mean, things like that, it's just not right. And so a film like that does create more problems for us trying to fight against that. But Netflix can air it, but they're going to have to deal with the repercussions of what people would say, because that might go a little bit beyond the pale. That's not just free expression in a sense to some people. I haven't seen it. I don't have any desire to watch 11-year-olds twerking. Doesn't do anything for me. So I'd be like, I got a 9-year-old goddaughter, and to see her dance like that would be that just doesn't seem right. And so I don't know exactly what it is all about, but I would defend their right to make it. Yeah. Even though I vehemently disagree with it.
And that's what I think the key difference is that the left in Hollywood, so like conservatives in Hollywood and outside Hollywood don't have this like intense animosity and this desire to silence people they disagree with. Where on the left, it's not just that I disagree with you, it's that I disagree with you and you must be quiet. You must not have the right to say what you say. And by the way, you're also a bigot.
Which is like, wait a minute, how am I the bigot? You're the one who has you're not listening at all to someone else's opinion. You're absolutely cutting off all discussion. You are the bigot. I just did a thing where Chad Lowe, who I grew up with, and I love Chad. He's a couple years younger than me. His brother Rob is a year older than me. Love Chad to death. He said something on his Twitter, was like, there's only 3 reasons anybody can be voted for Trump. They're racist idiots or something like that. They're stupid or blah, blah. And I was like, or number 4, they like his policies. I was like, Chad, there's a word for being intolerant of other people's political views and opinions. It's called, I didn't say the word to him, but I was like, I like you. I hope you really rethink this tweet, because that's madness. Right. It's just insane. And that stuff, that sort of rhetoric needs to stop, and people need to be called out for it. That's why I try to call out my friends who do it. Another guy who does awful stuff, says awful stuff, and a guy I like is Dave Bautista. He says things that are just so insanely angry and just like awful on Twitter, which I defend his right to say, but I mean, whoa, it's ugly. It's ugly behavior. And those words are going to be there after this time. And people are going to be doing a lot of apologizing, I believe, because they're going to be seen for being the intolerant bigots that they are. And that's not okay. Or the bullies, or whatever you want to call them. And I do hope there's a day of reckoning where there's a lot of apologies going round and round and round. My dad always wants this one thing for me. He's like, people ask me, does it hurt my opinion, my ability to work in Hollywood by being a conservative? He said, here's the line for you. So I'd tell him, well, I guess I'll never be able to make a movie with Harvey Weinstein.
No.
That's my dad's thing. Well, I guess I'll
What a loss.
Yeah, exactly. He thought it was, my dad thinks about these things and he comes up with the dad jokes.
That's better than a dad joke.
I do dad jokes. It's awful.
That's edgy comedy. That's good stuff. Actually, that leads me to a good question is, do you think from your vantage point as somebody who's out there that the Weinstein reckoning has persisted? Because there's a lot of talk about how Hollywood was being shaken up at the time. Do you think that's been an effective movement? Do you think things have really changed, or do you think things are just going to be swept under the rug even more effectively now?
I think things can change to a little degree. I mean, everyone's going to be doing sort of the same things, but a little more cleverly, if you will. Weinstein was pretty out there, I guess. Look, I only had one sort of like run-in with him, if you will, in something in that ballpark, and he shooed away. He went bye-bye because I was there, and it was very again. A lot of people say stuff on Twitter, stuff when you're eye to eye, man to man, things are a little different. And in that situation, all he did was look at me and goes like this, whatever. So, but it was weird because the friend that I was with, he kept calling and calling and calling. I'm like, wow, that's shocking. But I think that behavior will exist because I think there's a certain, producers and directors and this, filmmakers, people who have the power to make projects. It's the power. It's the same as it is in Washington. When you have and power is attractive to people and they want things out of that power. So there's going to be that casting couch mentality. Those things are going to exist. Now they'll be taken a lot more seriously. So I think that's where the change comes in. It's good. And nobody will be able to be as blatant about it as a Harvey Weinstein. But I think it'll still exist. It'll just be done more cleverly, more quietly, and that people will have better recourse if it does happen to them. Listen, I could tell some stories. I could be the biggest Me Too person as the receiving end of that. Right. But I don't need to.
Really?
I don't need to speak about those who have created that situation for me, but it's happened way more than it happens a lot more than one might think in the reverse.
And that actually is a really good segue into what I wanted to ask, which is that people are sort of dismissed as conspiracy theorists for coming up with these ideas about the level of exploitation that exists in Hollywood. And that was one of the interesting things about the Weinstein reckoning, is that people realized actually it's not even really a conspiracy, it's reality. So in the pejorative sense of the term conspiracy, and a lot of it was kind of open knowledge in the industry that this was happening. And so now people are starting to be even more, I think, susceptible to believing that there are some genuinely conspiratorial things happening with Hollywood's exploitation of children and young women, whatever. What is the real story on that? I imagine it's just kind of a market-based, we want to put beautiful young people, beautiful young women on screen. And so the way to do that is, these men are in bad situations. And when you have a lot of children working in an industry that doesn't always have a lot of formal oversight like you would have at an office or whatever it is, then children get into interesting situations. How concerned should people be about what happens in Hollywood?
Concerned about that. I would say very concerned. Here's another thing though. There's a certain type of person who's drawn to the film world too. There's a certain type of person who's drawn to that. So you want that, you have that personality about you where you want to be a performer and an actor and you're an artist and you want to do those things. There are people who are drawn to that and they're more susceptible because they just sort of see that as the same big melting pot. This is what happens in this world and that's what happens. As a parent, I would never not be by my child's side. Mm-hmm. Never. It just wouldn't happen because they're not adults. And they're in situations where they think they're adults. And, especially if they start getting press and stuff too, it's just really, just never. As a parent, never. You just got to be there. You just have to be there and be on top of it all. And even though the kid may be worth millions, still sleeps at home, has a bedtime, does these things, grows up like a regular kid. Then you're not going to end up screwed up when you're older. But, I'm the kind of guy, it's like, I don't do drugs. So people who do drugs don't do them around me because I don't like it. I don't like pedophiles. So if someone were to act that way around me, they're going to have a problem. And so I've never seen it. never heard it, because if I heard it or saw it, I would react, and it wouldn't be a positive thing for the person who was committing that violation, if you will. And so I just wouldn't, and there's a lot of people like that in Hollywood who wouldn't stand for that. You know, there's a lot of people like that, but there's also a lot of people who look the other way if it's this or that or the other thing. And there's been rumors and stories and things about people doing this stuff for decades, and those things don't come out of nowhere.
Right. And I mean, basically what I'm getting at is it's not necessarily a conspiracy. It's just sort of the logical outcome where you have all of these kids and adults in a situation, and there's money to be made, and there's less oversight. And there's then incentive to sweep it under the rug and, of course, not go public with it.
Yes, and also acting, you're playing with emotions and you're doing things. You're not, you know, you're pseudo-psychologists and directors and doing things. There's so much going on that it's a recipe for disaster. So I would not call it a conspiracy theory at all. You know, as far as pedophile rings and things like that, if I knew any of that, I would take them all down personally. I mean, I have a sworn obligation to do so, and I would love to. I would take them down in a heartbeat. But I've never seen anything. I've heard, you know, whispers and things like that. But again, they were like, nah, not around him, not around that guy. You know, yeah. Nah.
Right. Well, you know, you mentioned Sean Penn, and so this whole conversation, it's kind of exactly like Sean Penn is the archetype of what old Hollywood was, in that you have this like free thinking, super liberal individual. But I don't think a Sean Penn of the 80s could exist in Hollywood today and like climb the ladder in the way Sean Penn has done, because even though he's a avowed leftist, he's a very free-thinking person. He doesn't toe the sort of PC line. No,
not at all. Now, you see, Sean's father was blacklisted in Hollywood back in the 50s, Leo. So there's things people don't know about how he grew up and what he's. I call Sean a contrarian. Like if it's cool to be the surfer burnout, he'd be a straight A student. You know what I mean? I feel like Sean, he does that. Now, Sean is Sean, and Sean is one of the best surfers I've ever seen. By the way, he had huge respect because he's one of the best surfers in Malibu, period. And he was a tough kind of guy, and this, that, the other thing. And he talks about like having dropped acid and done this and blah, blah, blah. So like figure out this character and stuff like that. That's Sean. Now, is that cool? I wouldn't want my son doing that. But it works for Sean, and he's incredibly talented in his views, you know, whether it came from his upbringing, his father and things like that. Okay. But he is definitely a free thinker. You're not going to tell Sean what to say. He's not going to tell a party line. He's going to say what Sean thinks is right. And you don't have to agree with him or not. And he wouldn't say you had to agree with him. You know, so I respect him.
We lost our ability to separate the art from the artist, which when we're talking about the art world, it's just a sad thing because so many artists are free thinkers, and honestly, some of them are just straight up crazy, but they make great art.
I'll say this, some of the best actors that I know are the most screwed up individuals on the planet. And because they're so screwed up personally, they can just throw themselves into, and I'm not referring to Sean specifically in this instance. Right. Although maybe I am. I'm kidding. No, it's they're so screwed up personally that they can throw themselves into this character and do everything for this character and put it all out there on the screen because they have no place else to do that in their real life. So there are people who are like that. And that's one of the things that this business can allow you to do. And you can be lauded for having huge problems. I have huge mental issues about this, that, or the other thing. I'm going to display it naked on the screen and people will go, wow, what an incredible performance. You're like, yeah, I just had a breakdown on camera basically. And that's what, you know, that sort of stuff it's amazing stuff. And so there are people who are doing that without a doubt. I'm not one, but.
Right. And it just kind of, it leads you to the ethical question, the age-old ethical question, which is like, how do you watch Chinatown? You know, like, how do you watch Rosemary's Baby? Like, is it okay? And I mean, I think, of course, it has to be okay, but we have to sort of like devise a mentality that says you're going to have to patronize the work of people who have done a lot of bad things because that's just the nature of an artist, and you have to find a way to sort of do that without lining their pockets, if it's possible. I don't know. I don't think there's a great answer.
No, there isn't. There never has been. You know, and that is the question. But I mean, Rosemary's Baby, that was a good movie. Chinatown, fantastic. There's no question about it. You can judge the art by itself, and you should be able to, because you and I could watch the same movie and have complete different takeaways, and that's part of the experience. But like, I'll watch The Godfather and I'll say, wow, De Niro's fantastic. And I'll completely not put together that he's the guy who walked out on the Tonys on the stage and said, F Trump, and like got a standing ovation. Like that to me is disgusting. But his performance is amazing. He's a very good actor. Now, do I think he's a wonderful human being? Nah, I don't know him as a human being. I'm judging him on his work, and his work is good. I even liked him in the Fokker movies, the Godfucker. I thought, he's funny. He's good at those things. But I don't like his political stances, and I think it's a little bit, it's just so haughty. I don't know. It's just like, and it's always like they're always threatening violence in this sense. I'm like, what is the, what? Why?
And it's from people who were like cashing, and I'm not talking about De Niro specifically, but a lot of these people were cashing Trump checks for, years before. Like, how many people did Celebrity Apprentice to rehabilitate their career?
Yep. Well, what's funny is the people who were on Celebrity Apprentice, you don't see them tearing them down.
Mm-hmm.
They don't. Right. Whether it's, Piers Morgan or Geraldo Rivera or people who, you think might go after him, they'll say things they don't agree with about what he's doing, but they don't. They're like, he's a genuinely really nice man who really cares about people and has done so much things and blah, blah, this. I happen to really enjoy the president quite a bit. I judged like Miss Universe or Miss World, or I forget what it was exactly. I forget which pageant it was, but we were in the Bahamas, and I've always enjoyed him. I didn't do Apprentice. I had opportunities to. That wasn't something that interested me to do that. But I really enjoy the president, and I'm glad he's doing better in this whole coronavirus situation. That may turn out to be a big boon for him, to be honest, having gone through it and come out the other end, which I'm hoping he does healthy and wonderfully. And it's going to be an interesting election. I certainly hope it goes his way, because I am terrified of that whole cabal on the other side, and it's because they're entrenched again. They're the entrenched. Trump is the outsider. It's what took him so long to sort of get his feet underneath him. All these people who have these jobs forever and had this sort of life security on us, the taxpayer, doing this nefarious Peter Strzok and Lisa Page stuff, are being exposed. And I like that. It's Washington's own Me Too movement, but it's not Me Too. It's You Too.
Do you have opportunities to chat with the president at all? I know that he makes outreach to people who are kind of creatives regularly, but have you had a chance to chat with him while he's been in office? And so is he still the same Donald Trump that you knew when you were judging pageants with him?
Absolutely. All business, straightforward, very candid. I spent an hour with him in the Oval Office back in late February, right before we were doing a performance. And he joked about the Peter Strzok, because he had been doing at his rallies, he'd been doing like, oh, Lisa, I love you, Lisa. He'd been doing that thing. So I was like, I joked, I was like, Mr. President, I play the role, but you're pretty good. You might want to step in. He goes, I'll be your understudy. He's got a great sense of humor. He thought it was funny, but he was very candid about a lot of different things, and warm and friendly and lovely, and very, very human. And I think he has outworked anybody I know. I mean, I would be exhausted with the schedule he keeps, and yet he's still trucking, and I think he's pretty amazing. And I'm pretty excited for his second term, if he gets that opportunity with the House and with the Senate. Oh my gosh. And without Paul Ryan standing there as Speaker of the House, slowing things down.
Paul Ryan, that seems like it was 100 years ago.
Doesn't it?
Yeah, yes, it does.
Paul Ryan's like 42 years old or something. I mean, what is he? He's not even 50.
Yeah, no, he is pretty young. He's probably about 50. I don't know. I think so. An interesting thing about Obamagate, the movie, is that, I believe FBI Lovebirds, which was actually in a live theater production, this is going to be available on YouTube, and that's really the future of the industry, is streaming.
Not necessarily YouTube.
Not YouTube, yes, no, not YouTube.
Because they'll demonetize you in a heartbeat.
Right, exactly. And that's that gets to the heart of this battle for big tech and against big tech sort of narrowed boundaries of political speech. They take the far left's lead on all of this in terms of what should be deemed acceptable and what isn't. And so Right. And so it seems as though this technology, it is the future, but it's sort of scary what we'll be able to use it for as a platform when Silicon Valley is going in the direction that it's going in.
Well, like it's Orwell again. It's 1984. It really is. So much of what he said is so prescient now. It's like, what? Big Brother is watching. Well, yes, he is. His Big Brother's name is Google. He's watching everything you do, every click you make, every place you go, everywhere your phone goes, whether you have it on or off, everything, all that stuff. You're being tracked, and your financials are being tracked, and everywhere you go. And so it's frightening. And if if big tech takes one side or the other, they're stifling free speech and stifling everything else. It's not okay. Let me just close this. Something.
Yeah, you're good.
The Zoom call.
Oh, it's great.
Guy doing the stuff outside the window.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's very raw. So can you talk a little bit about your creative relationship with Christy Swanson, having now done, is it 2 or 3 productions? With
3
her?
Versions of it.
3 versions.
2 versions we read it, and then this final one.
I have to imagine there's also this kind of like, you're able to bond over the, like, being, sort of heterodox in Hollywood. And Christy, it seems like that's happened more recently for her, that she's come out openly as being on one side. But that has to be an interesting relationship for you guys, because you're able to kind of probably be more free in terms of your art. And that has to be a good thing to come together and do.
It's the true, like, artists. It's always like us against the world.
Mm-hmm.
It is us against the world. Here, nobody wants us to make the project. Nobody wants to play the roles. Nobody wants to do anything. And there's another thing I meant to touch on earlier, which is that my reaction personally, like when I cruise around, when I'm walking around places, when I get on planes, when I'm seeing people, I get taken aside and whispered, "Dean, thank you so much for your views and stepping out and supporting our men and women in uniform, and for doing this and for speaking up about the president. It's great. I appreciate it. Don't tell anybody I said that. Okay, bye." And there's more people. I hear that so often, all the time. And I defend anybody's right to have an opinion, whether I agree with it or not, but other people don't think we should have an opinion. And so I get people coming up to me and going like, "Thank you so much." And it's a lot. I'm surprised. And my son's just like, "What the heck?" He sees it. He's 20. He's like, he happens to be a pretty conservative kid, but I had nothing to do with that. But for us as artists, it does feel like it's us against the world, and that world of Hollywood. Like, they just scoff at the idea that we would play Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. Yeah, God, but because they refuse. And then you go see this, the Comey rule, and it's just like, I want to say the word masturbation with that, with Comey.
I mean, no, really, yes.
Because it really is. It's like, come on, the most self-flagellating thing ever. It's like, come on, seriously? But that's him. It's him in a nutshell. It's perfect. Right.
Where will people, or do you have a timeline on when people will be able to watch the film on YouTube? Is it dependent on the fundraising?
That's a producer question. Of course, everything's dependent on fundraising, I'm sure, to some degree. But to get 80-something% the way there is really great. And
oh yeah,
it's funny. By the time we get this thing out and made, it's almost like more Peter Strzok and Lisa Page stuff will come out. I mean, Peter Strzok has a book.
All the time.
Yeah, because they're discovering more things. Judicial Watch has been great about finding these things and uncovering them. Tom Fitton is a Superman in his own right, and he's doing a great job with that stuff. But there's more and more stuff just keeps leaking out, coming out. I think Christopher Wray's the next to fall. I don't think he's going to get indicted by anything, but I don't think he's going to be FBI director for very long.
Is there anything else people should know about this film, and what you guys are going to tackle and how you're going to do it?
I would just ask people to take a look at this film. Even if you're a Democrat and you support the Democratic platform, watch the film with an open mind and imagine it was reversed. Right. Imagine your Democratic candidate just got in and was an anti-establishment person, and then this is what the establishment tried to do to that person. Mm-hmm. And you see it for what it is. And I just ask people to have an open mind and take a look at it, and also enjoy the humor, because there's a lot of humor. We poke fun at it because it's funny. I mean, it's some of the things they say are funny. And some things are like, ooh, and it's just, I think, worth the watch. And so it's not propaganda. Certainly we have a point of view. And the point of view is that these guys were doing some bad stuff, but they were having like a junior high school romance at the same time. It's just so odd. It is so odd. Their own words you hear, you're like, what?
I love how you said junior high school romance.
Not even high school, junior high school, because the things they say and their little emojis and things they send to each other and stuff like that, it's just funny. You just wouldn't expect that would be the case. But
it's like what you said about the excitement of a nonviolent coup. and the sheer romance of it.
Exactly.
Oh man, Dean, thank you so much. People can donate to the cause on the website. The film will be out soon. Obamagate, the movie, on YouTube. Appreciate your time this afternoon, Dean.
Thank you. It's been a wonderful, wonderful discussion for however long it's been. How long has it been?
We're coming up on an hour.
That's amazing. You're very smart. You're easy to talk to. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Cut that part out of there. Cut that part out of there.
Yeah, right. Not a chance. My boss listens to this, man. Well, until next time, everyone, be lovers of freedom and anxious for the fray.